Okay, hey everybody. It's the 12th of December, 12/12/24. Ooh, that's a kind of nice date. And this is Gimbalabs Open Spaces. We meet on Thursdays at 14:30 UTC to make plans for what we're going to do next and to check in about ongoing work. And in just a moment, I'll hand it off to Newman, who's been working on a proposal. Harsha's had some input there. Anybody else been writing that one?
Emmanuel is not here. Um, and Andrew, Nature Dopes on Discord, has shown some interest.
Awesome. Awesome. So we'll get to that. And yeah, like Kevin said in the chat, some people might be reading the proposal for the first time. And right before we went live, Harsha was sharing, a wondering, does it does it help if you put in some time to craft a proposal? Does that lead to more efficient processes for getting to consent? So that's something we'll have a chance to look at today. Um, when we do read a proposal and we try to achieve consent, sometimes it might take the whole session. So we've got about an hour and 13 minutes to go. We'll see how long that takes. And if we do get through that, we can do a little bit more looking ahead to 2025. As Kevin mentioned in the chat, we have some insights about what proposals might be well supported. CF earlier this week released a detailed report about how they allocated their voting power. And good news is some of the Gimbalabs proposals were on that list. So that's really exciting. So we could talk about the implications for some of that. We won't know the final results until next week. Um, but yeah, I think once we have a solid proposal in our minds from starting there, we can then generalize a little bit and think about how else we might approach our work in 2025. But let's warm up with something really specific. Newman, I know you, Harsha, and like you said, Andrew has been pitching in a little bit. This is a proposal I'm really excited about. So why don't you take it away?
All right, all right. Um, Here I'm going to share my screen. I sent a link over uh, on the chat on the consent decision-making process. And so this is sort of the what I'd like to follow. And James, if I could ask you to sort of be to keep us in this box.
Beautiful.
Um, so one of the cool things is that we do have this sort of driver, and we start all of our proposals, projects, and this is the Notion that I'm sharing on the screen now. And it's kind of fun to read these drivers out. The Gimbal Labs primary driver is to provide open, replicable safe spaces to learn, to explore, and to empower individuals and organizations anywhere so that we can solve meaningful problems. Um, and we do that in a variety of ways. And so here is the driver for this proposal. Um, and I came up with a couple of different drivers because like you can have different ones, but I like this main one. Uh, and I'll read it and then I'll start summarizing. But hopefully you're reading along and listening to me. And I plan on taking about probably a little more than 5 minutes to read through this. But the idea here is for you to figure out questions that you don't understand, um,
And
about
Newman, just
the
as we're looking at the process, right? Step one is just to ask people whether or not the driver itself feels clear enough to work on, right? So
yeah,
so this is such a wonderful place to start, and knowing that you've taken the time to write several different drafts of it, this is your favorite one.
yeah.
Let's see how people feel just about the first driver.
Okay.
But
And
want to
so
give
did
us
I?
yeah, give us a little walkthrough of that, and then we'll pass it around.
Yeah. So here I'll read it out. It's pretty short. Gimbal Labs students need more opportunities to work on substantial projects, to demonstrate their skills, build confidence, and establish their reputation. I love that. And then here's what the proposal does. By providing a safe, replicable learning environment, Gimbalabs and this proposal enable students to engage with both the UTXO blockchain principles and front-end development skills. So is that sort of clear as to like what is motivating? Driver is sometimes kind of a hard term. It basically is just the context. Um, it's the current situation, the effects of that situation, and then the relevance to our Gimbalabs driver. You can thumbs up in the chat or come off mic and talk for a second. Providing. So Kevin asks in the chat, what does providing mean? So basically, Gimbalabs provides or uh, gives students PBLs, project-based learning, and uh, the inside of those are modules and lessons. Inside of those are assignments that basically help you learn things. It's organized around a student learning target or a mini goal. And what this does is create a larger assignment. It's called a project in the Endamio space. And it just basically is, sometimes they're called challenges. Um, it, it, and it, and it gives someone a project. That's what it does. It creates a framework. Yeah.
Yeah, in my mind, providing is a lot more than just software too, right? There might be software tools that help to facilitate, but we can use those words from the Gimbal Labs Catalyst proposal. We sustain and maintain spaces. We create together spaces like a playground or this one or live coding. And then in order to sustain and maintain them, right, so that we can provide these environments, we make sure that there's something relevant to talk about, right? There's a project that is interesting enough and open enough that people can jump in and start contributing.
And then on Damio, uh, I can bring this up. Inside of this, and is this in the main? Okay, it's in the pre-prod where there are courses, but there are also projects. And a project is what ultimately this proposal will provide. And it's really sort of what we're spending our resources to get, among other things. But this, I think, is one of the main outputs, which is a project that, in my mind, it's sort of Harsha and I and Manuel and Andrew and folks that want to come along on the journey uh, want to pioneer a challenge and to sort of it's like a journey that we go on, and we want to scaffold that journey for future learners through the Andamia platform. Um, and it means like activating all of our resources and putting it into a safe and replicable space. Because to be honest, learning blockchain development is not safe in a certain way. Um, the who was it? It was spacing his name. North, no. And somebody on Discord was saying that the documentation changes. So you'll get we've experienced that. That's why the maintainers are around. So you go in to learn on a tutorial and it's totally different. The Next.js, when in the tutorial they use version 13 and now it's 19, all sorts of things. It's a really fast moving target. And it can be really frustrating. It unnecessarily frustrates the process. Um, so yeah,
Maybe
that's
could you
about
bring
that.
it back to the driver for just a moment?
Sure enough.
Um, and yeah, we're starting to jump into a description of the proposal, which is really exciting. And just to kind of share a little bit about what we've learned from this, the consent process that we're starting to work through right now. It doesn't have to be drawn out, right? It's possible as a group to get to a point where we can move through these stages very quickly. And so I want to take us just back to this driver. Does this feel relevant enough to work on? Right?
And so,
If
yeah,
we
like
are
a
working
thumbs up.
on, yeah, if we want to provide people with these opportunities and create these learning environments, does that feel like a relevant use of our time?
Yeah, I'd like to just say something on it. I think Gimbalabs holds like a really unique position here because speaking as a say, like junior developer of 2 or 3 years, the hardest thing is finding opportunities to contribute to Cardano from a developer point of view, especially as a junior, but also in a position where I want to learn. And like most positions that are required are taken by people who are really experienced. And I think there needs to be, and I think Gimbal Labs holds this position where you can, we've got students who are learning, but also or finding ways to contribute to Cardano as a whole, and build an experience to be able to build bigger and better apps as we go. So I just think it's I really like the first sentence. Yeah, I think it's a really relevant driver.
Nice.
So another phrase you'll hear, I used the word relevant because that's directly in the facilitation notes that Newman shared. Another phrase you'll hear probably a few times today is, does it feel safe enough to try this? Right? Does anybody feel like it would create an unsafe situation to try to address this driver? Cool. And if there's no objections, then we can say, all right, hey, Newman, do you want to present the whole proposal to everyone?
Yeah.
But I see a hand from Harsha.
So I was just curious about the question you asked. Like, just by looking at the driver, can we say it's safe or unsafe? Because there are other factors like budget, re time requirements, and
Right.
things like that.
That's why we ask it
Well,
first here, right? We're going to peel back the onion layers down to the details. I don't know if that's the
yeah,
right metaphor or not, but right, we start at the very top level. Hey, do we think it's worth our time to think about how to create opportunities for people to work on substantial projects, demonstrate their skills, build confidence, and establish reputation? Do we think it's worth our time to provide safe and replicable learning environments that enable students to engage with these concepts, right? The principles of UTXO blockchains and some front-end development skills. And as long as we're okay with saying, yeah, you know what? Those feel like worthwhile things to work on, then Newman can jump in and talk about the details where we're going to ask a lot of the same questions. Hey, now that we're getting into these details, do the details of how we do the driver also feel safe enough to move forward?
yeah,
Cool. So let's assume that we're okay with the driver and pass it off to Newman, who's got a
yeah,
proposal for us.
right. And so what I'll do is you guys have you've been reading the proposal and you've got the material. Um, Let me give you just a very quick summary, and I'll scan through it. I'm not going to read it because it gets dry. If you want me to stop, just hold, maybe hold questions to the end or type them. You can comment in the proposal if you're on there. You can also put things in the chat. Um, but this won't take too long. So the title, we're just calling it Asteria App. Um, One of the cool things about the proposal format, it gives you the sort of the lay of the land. The landscape is this Asteria game, and I'm just going to briefly show like what that looks like. Um, Here's their website. Um, this is it's built with this wonderful stack. Okay, so that's the Asteria game. Um, the Gimbalabs and the Gimbalabs learners, we're familiar with that. Andamio network, which maybe some folks aren't so familiar, but that's how we distribute, or when you take a PBL, you're on the Andamio network, and you're interacting with those smart contracts. You're dealing with front end. All that stuff is on Andamio. Mesh is sort of the featured framework, that this proposal deals with, but also this thing called the T3 stack. And we'll get to know that more. You may or may not know that. So the intended outcomes, I'll just highlight one, and that is this creating a focused learning experience with the Cardano web stack. Focused means safe, it also means replicable. And basically what it's going to create is a devlog, like blog entries and a learning pathway that we're going to codify. Another one, a good one as far as a goal, is to be a bridge from learning to contribution. And you'll hear that phrase as you spend time here. Moving people along that contribution ladder. So we've broken it into 3 phases, and this might be good to think about. Sort of the orientation and getting familiar with the game. For instance, we've actually never played the game. We really would love to have Asteria Maro looking at you to come by and help us run the game, and that could be a part of the proposal. And then what we want to do, what we're proposing to do, is to rebuild the Asteria front end. And this is the GitHub of it. They've got a front end, a back end, the indexers, like all the things that are necessary. So we really want to dig into this and work with it, become contributors to it. That's the second part. And then this last part is to create a template, or if you're familiar, an Andamio project, such that other learners can accept the challenge, take the project on and build on it in order to establish credentials and get some work experience. And then you can see some of the details of what those phases entail. For instance, this last phase, a set of prerequisite skills needed for when you start the project, a list of tasks and subtasks that you would have to do in order to rebuild a T3 app with Mesh. You can think of it. This is sort of a way to think of it. It's a side quest. It's like a big challenge as a part of one or more PBLs in the Gimbalabs Andamio sort of framework. This could be taken by any number of students and any number of non-student people that it could be a way of expanding the reach of Gimbalabs. Let's stop there and to ask for any kind of feedback, or if you have any kind of questions. And I see Steve's hands up, so go ahead, Steve.
I just wanted to say I'm finding Kevin's questions really catalyzing questions, and in my own mind I'm curious from you, Newman and Harsha and Mauro, like I mean, to me it seems like with this project, and I don't know, right? I'm not a gamer, and I'm not trying to learn how to code. But what I'm wondering is, how many waves of students do y'all anticipate can come in there and actually contribute to this? I mean, because we could, if 5 years worth of students come through, is it possible this could end up looking like the cornucopias game, right? Could it just become that refined and polished if we provide the right framework?
That's a good question. And it's interesting because there's a couple of different things. Like, for instance, the Asteria project could become a large, gateway for folks. I think that's what TX Pipe is interested in. They want as many people playing that game and learning Cardano development and the EU2XO model, because it's different than other blockchain models, and getting familiar in a way. it certainly is the idea that it has a wide, lower the barrier to entry kind of thing. Um, as far as an estimate, I don't know. I would think because it is not just an assignment in a PBL, it will require time. Um, I'm sort of thinking of it as a collaborative project that like 2 or 3 people, Gimbalabs students that become friends and they say, hey, let's work on a project together. It's basically how Harsha and I have been working for the last couple of years. Um, Emmanuel has in Nigeria has a group of students that he thinks would be something that would give them a real world project that's not just a student project. Like, it has motivated everybody wants all open source projects want contributors. They also want to know that those contributors can contribute, that they have like, the first, it's like that snafu of like, we need contributors, but they have to have experience, but they need to have experience to get that, you know what I mean? Like this is that bridge. I hope that answers the question a little bit.
Yeah, I guess I was just asking. Yeah, just as I don't know how to say it anymore. Like how many generations of students can really do something with this? That's
Well,
my
it's interesting. Okay, so that generational thing, it will require more funding that what and resource than we want to ask right now. We want to ask for the first iteration and really just for us, the 4 of us right now, um, to build the T3 app and establish the connection and get the ball rolling. It's in my mind, and I think that matches with what Harsha was thinking.
Steve, I think that question is actually such an important one to highlight because I think this has the potential to be relevant far out into the future. Just understanding what do we mean when we talk about a Web3 game is part of what we would achieve with this project, and understanding that even for non-developers is really important in kind of understanding where Cardano fits in the development stack and what some of our future opportunities are. Anybody who's been hanging around Gimbalabs for any amount of time has probably heard of this concept of a headless application. The idea that you can build on-chain code once, but then reuse it in many different contexts. And I think that this game provides a unique opportunity to demonstrate what we mean by that. Because now that the on-chain code is built, TX Pipe has delivered it. And we might learn about it and be able to tweak it in some really fun ways. And if we do, great. But even right out of the box, what they've provided is something that anybody can create a new instance of, and then they can build a different skin on top of it. And that, I think, is one of the most important things Cardano developers and other stakeholders need to understand, right? Where does the on-chain value lie? And when can creative work be done on top of these existing on-chain tools?
Yeah, it was really interesting to me this week, this guy that came into the Discord server, this pre guy, and he wanted to know how to do a SIP68 thing, right? Because of shit that he's already building. And I thought, like I didn't want to blow him off. It was a time of day nobody was around, and I didn't want to blow him off and say, "Oh, take the course." You know, like, because I just kind of, he seemed real familiar to me, but I have no idea who he is. And I thought, there's got to be a way to meet people as educators, there's got to be able to meet people where they are. And so, like, if you've got somebody who's advanced and you are teaching, then I mean, you know this, James, right? You have to meet them where they are and not talk down to them.
Mhm.
And I really wanted to be at the live coding yesterday because I wanted to know if he showed up, because that was the end result was he really needed to just talk to somebody. And I don't know if he did or not. But like that's part of that's kind of like the complementary question to hysteria. It's like, what does a student need? A student needs to be able to contribute to something that's actually useful and that hits them where they are with where the education platform is where it is. And you don't have to come up with a new thing every 9 months, to do that for students. And that's why I really like this project. If it's got legs and a framework to just continually develop and continually, get more nuanced with students, because to me, it seems like we're obviously getting more and more students that are already pretty nuanced and sophisticated when they meet us. I mean, just Kevin is a great example of that, coming in here already kind of practiced.
Emmanuel, what do you think?
Hello everyone. Yeah, I think this project is very, very relevant because
Oh, we might have lost sound, man. Can you still hear me?
yeah,
Oh, hey,
are you guys hearing me?
Oh,
might have lost him.
let me, Emmanuel, if you come back,
Can I
come on
just,
back.
to what Steve
Can
was
can you
saying?
guys hear me now?
Oh, yeah, we got you now. Hey.
Yeah, yeah. So I was speaking about the diversity of skills this is going to produce for the Cardano's development students. Like I think a lot of people right now are getting boring of just learning Aiken and Pluto's. Um so right now, if this is not going to be like a scary
Ah.
am I still breaking?
Yeah, we lost you for another moment there. Hey, write what you're
Okay.
thinking in the chat, okay? So you
Yeah,
can
put it down in the chat. That'd
really
be
get
great.
that thought. And to this point, I agree with Emmanuel. And to Steve's point, I think it's helpful. And Newman, maybe you do this in the proposal. I think it is helpful to disaggregate two definitions of project. There's one definition of project where we're talking about the learning. Hey, this is a packaged thing that we can put in front of a student at a beginner, intermediate, and expert level where they can learn by looking at this existing project, right, in an already existing state. But there's a different way we mean project, which is as the ongoing thing that people can contribute more to, new features, new possibilities, right? A silly example would be, hey, take it from being spaceships to making it a discotheque, right? We talked about that a few weeks ago. There's a lot that could extend from this. And that's where I'm most excited about this project because I think it hits the sweet spot of maximizing the definitions for both of those definitions of project, right? We're going to have something to show to students, and we're always going to have this thing that if people want to take a next step, there's so many different possible next steps that people might take.
And to follow that on, and this addresses this waves of students and that issue that we came up with, and we could actually put this in the proposal or the driver that things go out of date. So if we craft the project correctly, then it will not change as much. So instead of following a very rigid tutorial, that's your goal is not to follow the tutorial to the end. Your goal is to make it a disco instead of being in space, or your goal is to switch it from this database to that database, or to build it with Astro or one framework Astro instead of the other framework next. Yeah, to modify it, to mod it. I mean, there's something beautiful about the modding mindset because it taps into a creativity and an energy that I think is something that we want to foster because that energy is necessary to get over the very steep challenges of learning to develop, especially in this chaotic environment where things change constantly. So yeah.
Well, Newman, I just want to add, and it mirrors the protocol itself, which was built to be modified.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. If that is definitely like a top goal to have like a cohesive, operating system or a cohesive sort of mindset mirrors the blockchain mindset. Does that say it?
And Kevin's hand was up and then down. Kevin, what do you think?
Yeah, well, maybe I'm quicker explaining. I was confused at first, and I would like you to clarify. So first, I had the impression that the Asteria code was the framework that you want to use in order to make some kind of a learning environment on that platform. Now I understand, probably it's something else. You want actually to use Asteria, the source code, and build some kind of a team where you update, upgrade, and change that code base in order to provide it as an example within your project-based learning curriculum to add a new course, let's say, in how to develop a UTXO-based game. Is that the case? Can you clarify, or am I still wrong here in understanding?
Harsha, I want you to also chime in, but I feel like that is exactly what we want to do. We're going to use this Asteria source code, and you can think about it as the whole community of the Asteria community because they have a connection with us. We love this. We love TX Pipe. TX Pipe loves us. We want to make a team. That's a part of it. The collaborative nature. That's what Gimbalabs, because that's where I'm assuming people will meet the team, and that there will be, structure and project management. For instance, like this little tool of consent decision-making process is like a little part of making a team and working through things. And then we want to update and modify the existing code base. And that can take any form. We just have, just changing it from Lucid to Mesh. That's the first thing that we saw. But we had more creative things because of this headless app type of thing. The existing on-chain code is there. And if we can get, and especially because there's so many front-end developers, so yeah, modifying that code base. And then there's another thing about being recognized so that there is a contribution, a credential that's formed. I think that's part of it.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to what Newman said. For this proposal, we'll be specifically working on the front end. That means the back end code we won't touch for now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
that's
one of
stated
those
in the
things,
proposal.
The name of the proposal itself is Asteria front end.
Oh, yeah, it is. That's right.
Yeah, but I do think it could be, I think it could be highlighted, and I'll put it down in this feedback.
I forgot about the title by the time we got into the details.
Yeah. And that's working with the front end, but then also I think the idea we can make more clear is the headless app. That we're going to work with this on-chain code, and that the learning target is to be able to read it and know where to put it and interact with it as opposed to changing it. It's a component that then we we plug in,
And
which
that,
is not,
oh,
yeah, that's not trivial, but uh, it's not overwhelming, and it feels like it's the first step for developer. If you're going to build a house, uh, you're not going to rework a water heater. Like you're not building a water. You know what I mean? You're plugging in the components. That's what, uh, in my mind, that would scaffold the learning environment. It's basically giving just enough support so that sooner, at some point they'll be like, oh no, I actually do want to change the minting contract, not just make a few
right,
little alterations.
right.
I do want to change it so there's a different validator or there's a new aspect of the game. Like, oh, let's make an enemy. And the enemy is, an oppositional force. Like, how would we do that? And I don't know, but I think that it could be, like it could develop from there.
I'm going to bring us back to the process. And we are doing something particularly challenging when it comes to consent in this space. Often, people who enter into the consent process together have some experience together already. And often this process is used with smaller teams, right? So you can imagine a large organization that's broken up into sub-circles where this process becomes very quick. We're going to do a slightly abbreviated version of this because we are doing it in an open space. And so I'm not going to do a round where I ask everybody to share a brief response by name. However, we will, as for this part of the process, invite quick responses. An example of a quick response is, I like it, or, I'm not sure about it. That's an example of a brief response. And so if anybody wants to either unmute and share their brief response or type it in the chat, now is the moment for that. And then we'll move on to the next round where we are, as you can see on the screen, checking for possible objections. So does anybody want to share just their brief vibe right now? How you feeling about this proposal, either by unmuting or in the chat?
I would. Um, so I really like it, and I honestly I took a Haskell developer course over a year ago, and honestly I never thought that I would even remotely come close to doing anything of the sort. And a course like this actually gives me hope. I'm like, oh, I think I could do this. Like I was like, and it's real, and I was like, so I think it looks really great. I really enjoy being part of the process. I think that by itself is also really positive, seeing how, like it starts and how it kind of iterates over time, just the life cycle of it all. I think it's really great. So that's pretty much my feedback.
Thanks, Monique. In the chat, if anybody else is thinking about chiming in, I'll read Emmanuel's while you're thinking about it. Emmanuel says, giving students a different stack in front-end development and Web3 gaming, students with non-technical skills can get into the front-end course as well. Web3 gaming is still a bit new in Cardano, though people are so much interested in it by using NFT access functionality and smart contracts for payment in the game. Giving an opportunity to unlock this market to Cardano by learning on this project, right? The collaboration of all of us here, Gimbalabs, the use of Andamio with the help of Asteria and T3 app. Emmanuel, thanks. And yeah, I wish we were
Yeah,
in the
that's
room just talking, man, and the connection was better.
really good.
Before we move on to the next stage, does anybody else want to just share their brief thoughts?
Hey guys, just want to say I love the idea. I was chatting with Newman yesterday about this, so congrats for taking it on. And yeah, it's going to be surely inspirational for a lot of people to so basically you're facilitating something that's already open source that it's going to be reinvented and bringing it in house a bit. So congrats for this.
All right, going once. And let's move on to the next step. Okay, so step 5 is a very important step in the process. Now we will check for possible objections. Now, before we jump into this, can we just look at that picture for a moment, Newman? This is on the S3 page, right? You can see where the rest of the process has been linear so far. This is the cyclical part. What happens if somebody has an objection? First, we will check to see if the argument qualifies as an objection. More on that in a moment. And if it does, we'll resolve it. The idea here is to think of objections. And this is the mindset shift that all of us are working really hard on. I'm not fully there yet. Sometimes I feel defensive when somebody objects to one of my ideas, right? But our goal together is to understand objections as the fuel on which our work, just thrives. When you make an objection, you're giving somebody a gift. Now, we are going to filter those gifts, and that's what happens at the testing step. Once somebody makes an objection, we will ask, hey, is that objection relevant, right? Does it represent something that would make this proposal actually unsafe? Or is it just a matter of personal taste, and does it not actually have to be resolved right now? So I will lead the process of checking for the relevance of arguments. And then if they are relevant, it's on Newman and Harsha to refine the proposal to resolve those objections. Does anybody have questions about that process? Yes, contrarianism is welcome, but often in this process, we will say, hey, you're entitled to that contrary opinion, and that doesn't qualify an objection. And that too shouldn't be taken personally. It's the hard work of building proposals together and really leading towards refinement and not just stalling. So with that in mind, you have the proposal in front of you. Does anybody have any objections to this proposal as it's currently written? Now's a good time. Yeah, if anybody is taking the time to read through, that's a great use of time.
Yeah, and let's set the timer for like a crazy amount of time, like 30 seconds of just sitting, because let them find out. Although we do get some hands.
Yeah,
Harsha's got a hand up, and
let's go for one more minute, just to give people a chance to situate to the proposal.
I'm gonna go get a cough drop. So you won't even be able to do anything until I go and get my cough drop. It'll take me 1 minute. Okay.
I'm just scrolling up the chat. I'm going to paste the link again for anybody who needs it. We have Harsha, Kevin, and Steve on deck to share, but just take one more minute right here to take a look. All right, so now we will move into the objection phase. Actually, Newman's still getting a cough drop. We'll give him a minute to get back.
I have a quick question before Newman comes back. So are our objections up until the point we covered in the proposal, or are we thinking of the whole proposal at this point?
Excellent. When we move into the objection phase, we are actually starting the final stage, right? This proposal will be consented to when there are no outstanding objections. Right? So this is how we start the process, by first asking for those. Those will lead to that cycle that we saw, but eventually we will finish our last round of that cycle. And when we do, step 8 is to celebrate.
So in that case, I think there are a couple of things that we still need to cover so that we get like a full picture of the proposal. One is compensation. Two is the amount of time that the advisor position has to put in. If you guys can just like go through that, or I can explain, either way is fine. Um, yeah.
Absolutely. And that would be, once we resolve some other ones, that's my objection, is that the proposal is not quite done. And to resolve that objection, we would be looking at sections 8 and 9, 7, 8, and 9. So it does sound like that one's ahead of us. But before we get to that objection and that fine tuning, let's go to Kevin and then Steve. Kevin, what do you think?
Yeah, I have no objection other than that the objectives. Let me go back to chapter where the phases are, chapter 4. And there you have phase 0, phase 1, and phase 2. I wonder if this discussion can be redone after phase 0 has passed, instead of now discussing it as a whole. My idea is that, okay, how do you feel living through phase 0 and then see how it went, and go on like that? That's the thing. I'm personally not in the right place to be objective or have too much of a say here, because I will probably, after 15 January, I see then you will start, January 15th or something like that. I will probably be busy with Marlowe, for example. So I would love to join in, but I don't know if I have time for that. So in that sense, I will leave the table and the choices to you. Thank you.
Excellent. So just checking to see if that qualifies as an objection. We heard Kevin share that he's unlikely to be able to participate directly in the project, but is interested to follow it. So we don't have to worry about that. That's a great statement of just your personal relationship to it, but we don't have to worry about an objection there. Potentially, it qualifies as an objection that the scope of this project with phases 0, 1, and 2 is too much for one proposal, if we were to frame that as an objection. And so I'll pass that to Newman to take that on. If the objection was that, hey, maybe the scope here, phases 0, 1, and 2, all in one proposal, is a lot for one proposal, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, something, and Harsha and I talked quite a bit about this, that really, I think the natural break comes between phase 1 and 2. So phase 0 is collecting everything, getting sort of established, the project management and sort of establishment of this first group. And then phase 1, the second phase, is actually building out and going on the learning journey. And then the next phase is to create the scaffold or the project or craft the material in such a way that future students can go through it. So I think that's a great insight, Kevin. And it's too much. Now, one way that we could change it is we can get into how we can change it, but I definitely see that and recognize that objection.
Beautiful. So this surfaces something that you and Harsha have already been talking about.
We have, yeah.
Yeah, and I actually agree. I would have an objection if we stopped after phase 0, right? I think I could see maybe that phase 2 feels like a lot to pull all into one proposal. But for me, without phases 0 and 1 together, if we only did 0, it would feel like the project wasn't even getting started, right? This is kind of the background. And I would love to make sure that there is a legitimate deliverable here. And I see one in phase 3, or sorry, phase 1. So that feels really good. How would you guys feel about updating the proposal so that you can tell us that phase 2 is coming, but is not the scope of this proposal? It still feels useful to me to like name some of phase 2 because you're going to be thinking about it while phase 1 is happening.
Yes, that's sort of that concept of begin with the end in mind, that
Yeah.
the reason why we're taking such a long time to establish the relationships, all the things in front in the first phase, phase 0, um, uh, like managing our time or documenting our journey, those will become the source material for that last phase of creating a replicable project that could then go into Andamio as a Andamio project and or a course. It could be that there's a dedicated, project course, or that it can expand and be extendable beyond it. Otherwise, we would just take the tutorials and do it for ourselves.
Yeah. So it
Yeah,
sounds like there's several potential things that could happen next. And kind
right.
of it feels to me like the safest proposal to write here is one that keeps those options open. And I think maybe we would accomplish that by saying phases 0 and 1 are the direct scope of this proposal. And there's some thinking we've already done about what would follow that. That's what you're currently calling phase 2. And just
Yeah.
for context, there is a precedent for this. This is exactly how the proposal for delivering PPBL 2024 was written. It laid out that this proposal was about delivering a first draft of the course, right? Just getting the lessons and code examples done. And then it said sometime later, we're going to think about how to maintain this course into the future. And indeed, just a few weeks ago, we got approved the next phase of that work. And PPBL maintainers are now taking on the work of updating the course into the future. So I think that's a pretty cool emerging model, is that we are writing these proposals that point to future proposals.
Yep.
Well, I don't know. That objection felt like a gift to me.
Yeah, definitely.
Kevin, if Newman and Harsha refine their proposal by moving phase 2 out of its direct scope and pointing towards the future, do you think that would resolve that objection?
Yes, so I followed very well what you mentioned. I wonder what will be your practical strategy when you execute these phases? Are you going to do it in a quick and dirty way?
I'm going to pause right there. This is not an objection, so it's not the time for that
Ah,
clarifying question right now. Okay.
Yeah.
That's probably a really relevant question, but make sure that you're framing it as an objection to what you see on the page here. Steve, your hand was up earlier. Do you still have something?
I had a high level tangent that I decided not to express.
Cool, thank you. Does anybody else have objections to this proposal, the way it's currently written? All right, I'll throw mine into the ring then. My only objection is that we have to finish the proposal. And so what I see here is that the timeline is relatively loose. We have a start and an end date, and the resources required and responsibilities are lacking some detail. And so I would love to jump into those details um, as a way of getting to resolution. So we know exactly what we are not objection to.
All right. So we do have a loose timeline, and that's about 4 months. So inside of those 4 months, there is, and we can kind of look at some of the details, but briefly, they are a monthly project report that we give in open spaces. That's something that normally happens here. But we also want to have, it's sort of in a sprint way, that we would, as a cohort of builders, that we would have meetings and I can't remember exactly what our timeline is, but there would be meetings and such in there, and then have a closeout. There's a couple of details in there. Now, the resources requirement is the juicy part. It's basically how much time and attention, money and resources should we spend on this? We have an idea to be paid by task, meaning that there would be a task to complete, just like a contribution model, like DWork and the Andamio task, so that there would be a monetary compensation for the task. And it could be, anyway, this is an open-ended thing. We don't exactly know, but what would be great to find out, to give it more specific, is like what would be the overall budget for this type of work. And it does change because we've now kind of separated into two phases. It'd just be for phase 0 and for phase 1. And that might adjust, Harsha, looking at you, it might adjust our timeline. Do you think that we could build it out in half the time? Could we do it in 2 months if we don't have to specifically develop a project? So I'm looking for insight and like how this work should be compensated, and then really specifically, is there like an overall budget? Is it 5,000 ADA, and we will be paid in ADA? Is it 2,000 ADA, 5,000 ADA, 20,000 ADA? Yeah.
I just also wanted to add a little bit of detail to what Newman said. So for now, what we have been thinking is that the advisor, hopefully James, can spend about 30 minutes every 2 weeks just to like figure stuff out, and then we'll go do the work and come back in the next 2 weeks, just so we have someone that knows what's happening. Yeah.
Beautiful. And yeah, I'm so excited about this project. This is a project that I've been trying to carve out time to just do because I'm interested in it. And so to see a team coming together to work on this is out of this world. It's awesome. And so you have my commitment, and we'll figure out the budget line for me. But I do think Newman's question about like high level, what's a reasonable sum to allocate to this project is important. And again, this is another place where we're doing something pretty unique here, right? We don't have 14 people in this room who are just on a payroll, right? We're 14 people who are showing up. There's a limited amount of funding to do what we want to do, but it's a non-zero amount of funding. And with the recent increase in the dollar value of ADA, maybe we can do more with it. So just a little bit of historical context. Back earlier in the year when we approved Plutus PBL, delivering those modules, what we budgeted was 300 ADA to write a lesson and to build out the code examples to go with it, and 150 ADA per lesson to proofread it, right? To give that final editor touch. I'm failing to find the right words there. Right, so 450 ADA per lesson, and that was when ADA had a market value of between 20 and 40 cents. Call it average of, let's call it about a third, right? So about 150 USD per lesson. And I could talk more about the time commitment of that in just a minute. More recently, we approved a maintainers cohort of people who are updating the course. Oh, and by the way, the final budget for PPBL 2024 was 13,500 ADA. And I haven't gone back to check that I don't think we even quite used all of it. I think we almost did, but I need to do a final check and just look at all those transactions. But yeah, that was the total amount of ADA for that. For the maintainers cohort, we more than doubled that amount to 28K ADA. because it's not about only updating the course, but really setting an example and really taking the work of maintaining a shared resource into governance. And so you can see that, right? Like writing the thing the first time is coming in at half the cost and at a lower dollar value than maintaining it. And I think this speaks to the Gimbalabs organizational driver, right? We're not here just to publish a course. We are here to create resources that are resilient into the future. And that's really hard work. So I hope that that breakdown makes sense to people why there's such an increase in funding for the next project. Those numbers are drawn from a treasury that currently has what 110,000 ADA in it. I can pull it up. It's on the Gimbalabs prototype. Harsha just received and deposited the rest. 109,000 ADA. Okay, so right as of today, there's 109,000 ADA in the treasury. 28K of that is accounted for. So we can kind of take that 28K for PPBL and subtract it. So that means we have 81K. And I think most of the payments for running Playground haven't yet gone out. So that was about 6K for running Playground for a couple months. And then there's a couple payments left for facilitating spaces. I don't think I've collected for November. And then December is kind of a half month. So that would be half. So rough back of the napkin math, we've still got more than 70K ADA that's unaccounted for. And if you look at these numbers and you look at having 70K right there, maybe we could start to throw out numbers. What proportion of that would be worth allocating to this project? Budgeting in public. This is more revolutionary than blockchain itself.
Yeah, you know, I think there's I mean the compensation for the advisor, because I would love to have you as an advisor. I know that you're excited, but I would also love sort of it to make sense on the market. Maro is here, and you know, I would love to see a TX pipe advisor, you know, because that ultimately is, I mean, you know, for lack of a better, I mean, you feel like a teacher and a friend, but I would love to have an advisor that has a little more distance, that's a little, you know, like that that feels, or at least in my mind, feels more real world. No offense, I'm not, you know, I'm just saying that
Yeah.
the you know, like I don't know, there would be nice to have that sort of separation. So ultimately, it would be cool to have like for these, but that might be in the future as far as like when it becomes its own student project. Um, for me personally, it doesn't require that much, but in order to get the collaboration, I do think that it needs to be in. I mean, I always look at 10%. Like no proposal should take 10% of the budget, more than 10% of the budget. How mission critical is this? I feel like it's pretty mission critical, meaning that if we are to eventually get to a project on like a big full project that involves like stakeholders, that's a meaningful project. And if it goes in on Domio as a project, it sort of stands next to a course. So that's great to get the historic sort of data. So 13,500. I mean, that could be a number that we, you know, maybe that's the upper limit because the PBL is a huge thing. I feel like I would suggest, and Harsha and I are putting our heads together and coming in private and saying, is 7,000 too much to ask? Is that a good starting spot?
I like the rule of thumb to maybe not spend more than X percent on any given
Yeah.
proposal, but That doesn't feel high enough to me,
Okay.
honestly. And just to throw out round numbers, what about splitting the difference somewhere in between having the basic course and having it well maintained? What if building a exemplar of a project that's going to have utility not only in PPBL, but also in Mesh PBL, right? We can point to this project from there. We can point to it from Aiken PBL. We can point to it from the DApp, the general DApp PBL that Hinson is conceiving right now. Just throwing out a round number, spending 20K ADA on this project wouldn't feel bad to me.
Steve's give us a thumbs up. Harsha's got the sweaty smile because more money means more sort of, responsibility and, like that.
Right?
We would need, I think at that, and sort of Harsha, I want you to chat now. And Emmanuel, if also.
For me, I mean, 20,000 seems like a lot with like the higher ADA price. But if it's 20,000 for all three phases, then I think it makes sense instead of just one zero and one phase,
That's true. I still
Yes,
had
well,
phase two in my head, I think, when I said that too. So, right, another way to think about it would be, what if we say likely about 20K for all three phases? If we're talking about phases 0 and 1 right here, what percentage of the work are those?
Look, I just
now
want to
that's
inject.
interesting.
I just want to inject the thought, right? Because of what James just pointed out, all the different applications, all the different directions where you can take advantage of this project, right? This is the network effect. And that's why you can't be afraid of money. You can't have this low self-esteem of like, oh no, I shouldn't be paid that much, right? This is the fucking network effect.
Yeah, I
be
think
quiet
it's a
now.
fair amount of work as well. There's going to be some technical problems to solve in it. I don't. Hard to say at
Yeah,
this
that's true.
point. How much work it's going to end up being, but not an easy thing to put a number on it. Totally accept, but yeah, it's a fair amount of work.
So now let's think about, and Andrew, like, what do you think of the time commitment? Because we talked about the time commitment for the advisor. Where did we put that? The responsibilities, yeah. So we've got a time commitment from the advisor, like a 30 minutes every other week, and we're thinking that might get a little, who has a 30-minute meeting?
That doesn't feel right, exactly. 30-minute meetings don't feel realistic to me. So if we want to be honest, an hour, and I'm willing to do this one week.
Harsh is giving the double cry. Harsh is giving the double cry because he's like, we'll sneak it in. We'll just say 30 minutes, and then it's going to go to an hour.
I mean, we did discuss that. Yeah.
That was exactly what.
But
this
is valuable stuff. And especially if this can be another one of those open spaces, right? Yes. Will there be a core team of Harsha, Newman, and Andrew running with this thing? Heck yeah. And I think you guys should have very specific budget lines. Emmanuel, I would put you in that as well if you want to, right? You guys decide who's on that list. But if these can also be meetings that are just announced in the Gimbalabs Discord and people can come watch. That's what we're doing with PPBL maintainers as well, right? We put a link out there. There is a scope to that meeting, but other people are welcome to sit on the outside of the fishbowl.
So, Harsha, just real quick, I want to we're getting towards the end, but this would be an example of, because we've got open source, but there's also a thing called open development, meaning that we build with the garage door open. And so, yes, I would support that because that would be a value add. Kevin put himself down as an observer. So then we could have like a role of observer. And it's just like, yes, there are these they're contributing resource, and that adds to the value. So yeah, I can put that down in under the builder responsibilities, and I'm always happy to facilitate.
And just to put a number, like this more context, right? Currently, we decided in the which spaces proposal that 90 minutes of facilitation was worth, oh, now I
Okay.
forget. We have it here somewhere, but I'm collecting a total of 800 ADA a month for facilitating for 2.5 hours a week. So it sounds like I've been collecting 80 ADA per hour of facilitation. And that's right at a very low rate. That was back when we decided that number, and it was about a third of a dollar, right? That was really more of a symbolic thing. But I would feel
Right.
fair asking for, yeah, $80, 80 ADA per hour, whatever it ends up being worth, to
Yeah.
facilitate. So if I could count on, if we do that 4 times per month and for the length of this project, uh, what would that mean? 16 times 8. So the budget line for me would be maybe 1,200 ADA over the course of the 4 months.
Yeah.
And we can ask that question, like, Mauro, would you be willing to attend for 1 hour per week for 4 months for 1,200 ADA to advise this project? Like, how would that number feel to you? Now, we're not asking you to officially commit, but like just as a rough number, how would that feel?
Yeah, I think it sounds good. Yeah.
Now it's also hard to like understand what 4 months means, because what we're not really getting into the details to, and I believe we shouldn't, is exactly how many hours all of you will spend on this,
Yeah.
right? Gimbalabs we could flip a switch and we could decide to be kind of a place where we're tracking each other's hours, but I think that would be contrary to our primary driver, right? That wouldn't feel safe to me. So for all of you, if you could take it away, I think next steps would be figure
Yeah.
out who's in the project, right? Is Emmanuel in and out? The other three of you, are you fully committed? And then working backwards from maybe 20K for all three phases, how would you bring us a proposal next week for then how to break that down?
Okay.
So I have a small comment on what James said. Instead of tracking per head, me and Newman were discussing that it would make more sense to do it per task, so that even if some people have lesser time and some have more time, like we still manage to get it done.
That's amazing, right? So really, if you want to, better than telling us this person will get paid that much and this person will get paid that much, if you can show us, yeah, a breakdown, and this is milestones, right? A breakdown of those deliverables for phases 0 and 1, and an ADA value for each. Now, everybody who's consenting to the proposal has something specific to object or consent to.
Yep. That's right. This is a pay per elephant slice or pizza slice. And that feels like yeah, it does. It feels much more humane or decentralized, because then it allows for a little more autonomy. It allows for people to come in and go. I do think that we want to limit like a core maintainers, unless somebody is really interested. Andrew and Emmanuel, Harsha and I feels like the right team. And we won't all contribute the same, but we'll like that feels like the right core team to us. Emmanuel has that his in Lagos, Nigeria, he has like a computer group, like a student group. And so he has like a real his driver that's just exactly what he wants. And you remember his comment, like, so he knows it's like it makes sense for him to be involved with this project, because he can then deliver it to this whole group. And so he has a motivation. James has a motivation and to make this an Undomio project so that the whole of Gimbalabs gets access to this. That's why, we're continuing. We all have a stake in it. So I feel really good about this process. I'm looking down at the time, and I'm feeling like, yeah, I know, and what I can do for next week, and hopefully get these details, and we'll listen to the tape again, the video recording. We'll go through and get all these details down in. So keep looking in the Discord, and I will, and if I can get permission to do an at everyone, an at here, to sort of let you all know that the changes have been made, and please review it. But I feel hopeful to go through the entire consent process with a finished proposal next week.
So one little catch there. So we already tried to break it down, but my concern was that we don't have enough background knowledge to actually make like a meaningful breakdown. So the reason we were thinking, the way we were thinking was if the proposal gets approved, we sit with James for the first session and then break down. But I was just hoping we could get some suggestions on how to break down if.
Let's do that at live coding next Wednesday.
Nice.
Because it's a combination of a technical and a planning question to think about, like, oh, well, what might the time commitment for each of these things be? Where are the unknown unknowns? So yeah, let's do that. And is Andrew still here? I think he had to drop. But Andrew and I were
yeah.
Oh yeah, there you are.
Yeah.
We were talking about also next week just spinning up a brand new T3 project and checking whether or not Mesh would work if we take the app approach versus the pages approach. That actually fits right into this, right? So let's do kind of a pre-launch extravaganza next Wednesday for our final live coding of the year. But one of the outcomes there will be to kind of scope out those deliverables. So if you guys could just have it ready for us to then drop in those ADA values, that would facilitate that.
Yep. Beautiful.
Andrew, are we on
Beautiful.
for next Wednesday? Is that okay?
Wednesdays are a bit tricky with me, but leave it with me. I'm going to see what I can do.
Don't worry. And if you
Nice.
can't make it, I have the problem statement you and I were talking about in mind, and we can at least demo that. That fits into the scope of that session either way.
Yep. Okay.
All right. Very cool. And y'all, having sat in a room of people playing this, I'm willing to promise that us playing this game in a Zoom meeting is going to be a really fun experience. I'm just so excited for that moment where we can hang out and just have a little riot together, have some laughs.
Yes. And Maro, let's make it happen. Let's do it. Like, that's definitely, that would definitely fall into phase 0, and that would be a task that could be compensated. Like that would be a cool thing. Because I think as it is, there's like a little reward if you win, get to the middle. So that'd be fun.
I mean, that's a potential business opportunity, right? But
yeah,
that's phase 3 or 4. So we'll save that.
That's initiating phase 4. Okay. Thanks, y'all.
All right, y'all.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks for this one. Newman, Harsha, Emmanuel, thanks for preparing it. And yeah, talk soon, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.